Alrighty, good morning to folks on Zoom. The computer is very slowly waking up, and so are the rest of us, let's be honest. Alrighty. I'm going to take a sec to just check in everyone who's on Zoom, and then we will go ahead and get started talking about social psych for folks in person as well as folks on Zoom. Just want to give you all an update. I unfortunately had bronchitis. And so I got nothing done over break. I was like gonna go through and catch up on grading and all kinds of fun stuff, and it just did not happen. So thank you in advance for your patience. Bear with me, and we will just soldier on together here. And we have a really fun chapter we're going to be starting here, and that is talking about social psychology, which is a subfield where we really look at human interaction in a different way than a lot of these other subfields that we've been talking about. So hopefully you all will find it pretty interesting, pretty intriguing, and then we'll go from there. Alrighty, and I'm guessing, again, since I've been really sick, that a lot of folks are still really sick. Hopefully y'all are able to travel back from break if you traveled safely. And there we go. Double checking. I got everything. All right. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and share screen here. And so I do have a little psychology in the news for us today. Couple quick things about social psych. One is from the American Psychological Association, and they were talking about how they did a whole issue on the issue of racism within psychology. So a lot of special issue articles related to that. So fully acknowledging this is a problem. And then one of the first things we're going to talk about in social psych is relationships. And so I thought this very recent article came out yesterday. It was sort of interesting about how having frenemies is really actually bad for your mental and physical health. And so I'm not going to subscribe to show you the whole story, but I thought that that one was pretty interesting. Alrighty. And if the computer wakes up, then we will be able to open today's lecture. I'm also behind on posting the recordings because I just have not been able to really sit up. This is the best I've been in about, well, all of break. So again, thanks for your patience with me. I will try to get everything caught up as soon as I can. All right, angle that this way. And so social psych has arguably some of the most interesting and coolest topics in psychology. And like I said, we're going to start by talking about relationships, and in particular, close relationships. And close relationships are those that are important to us. A lot of times they're interdependent, so that person depends on us, we depend on them. And close relationships also tend to be long-lasting. They come in many different forms, including family, friendships, work relationships, which sometimes might be friendships, sometimes might just be more surface level, romantic relationships. For some people that will culminate in marriage, for others, marriage is never on the table for them. And so there are lots of different ways we can be close to people. And I think a lot of people, when you talk about closeness or relationships in general, immediately think romantic relationships. But it's important to think about the whole spectrum of relationships and how those can have a really positive impact on our lives. Now, we do know that cultures vary in their relationships. And in particular, if we do sort of narrow in on talking about marriage, cultures can really vary on their emphasis on romantic love for a basis in marriage. And so there are these two different types overarching of cultures. Individualistic cultures are ones like American society, where the idea is like, you get as far as you can, you know, take care of you try to really focus in on individual achievement. There are also collectivist cultures. Many Asian countries or Latin American countries are more collectivist. A lot of indigenous peoples are more collectivist. And the idea in collectivist culture is like, success is defined by the success of everyone, right? So if you're in the workplace, it's everyone in the workplace. If you're in your family, you're trying to like all get to a better place together. And so those individualistic cultures, like the US, we really do tend to focus and fully embrace the idea of marriage for love as the ultimate expression of individualism. In collectivist cultures, marriages are much more likely to be arranged by families. Now, this doesn't mean that everybody has arranged marriage, obviously. It's just much more common in collectivist type cultures. And that is because it's sort of like your family is part of the decision, and your marriage is not just for you, it's for sort of bringing together two different families. Arranged marriages are still common in many parts of the world, including India, Japan, China, and parts of Western Africa. And in India, where they have arranged marriages, what they find is that love in marriages actually tends to increase over time, right? So they might not know each other that well when they get married, but then over time, they actually grow in love. Whereas in some cases, when people marry for love, love actually decreases over time. It's not, you know, a universal, but it can happen. Now, one of the things that we've studied more in recent years is the internet and relationships, because we know that there are relationships we have with people, whether they be romantic or friend, right? That like, we've never met the person, or we've only met them a couple times. And most of our interaction is maybe social media, email, things along those lines. So this is sort of an intriguing topic of, you know, are internet or these virtual relationships, can they be as close as your face-to-face relationships? And research says, yeah, that they can be as close and as stable as traditional relationships. And again, whether that's friendship, whether that's romantic relationships. And in fact, the anonymity of online interactions may facilitate closeness because it reduces the risks associated with self-disclosure. However, all of this assumes that the person is being honest, that they're presenting an honest persona online, they're not catfishing, right? And so there are many possible advantages to meeting people online. It reduces problems of geography. People who have health issues or they have a hard time leaving the house can still connect, right? Also, if we think about it just from like a social support point of view, there are online communities, be it, you know, websites, Facebook groups, Reddit threads, right? For like people who all have the same disease and they can support each other and talk about their shared experiences. If people have transportation issues, right? This can help eliminate that. People with very severe social anxiety, or there's a more extreme version called agoraphobia, where people have a hard time leaving their houses. They can connect, they can get that social support. And in particular, those internet groups for folks with things like cancer, HIV, depression. There's been some really interesting research on how much having like online communities can really help folks who are depressed. So these can be really, really helpful. And I think, unfortunately, in 2020, 2021, right, we saw this really starkly. Like we would have virtual happy hours, right? Or like my husband threw a Zoom birthday for me, and a bunch of my colleagues hopped on, and I didn't know. It was a surprise. So I'm not even joking. I was putting my daughter to bed and I fell asleep, and my husband had to be like, you need to come downstairs. Why? Well, surprise. Oh, that was nice. But just being able to have that connection, right? Even when we couldn't physically be together, becomes really important. Now, a lot of people are very intrigued by the idea of romantic relationship, right? And attraction and love. And so that's something that social psych has studied quite a bit. So 3 primary factors underlie initial attraction between strangers. One is logistical, proximity. We're more likely to become involved with people we're geographically or spatially close to. Again, the internet can change this for us. My cousin met her husband online, and this was like early days of like eHarmony, right? And they ended up moving to live together, and they have a kid who's like a senior in high school now, which boggles my mind because I remember him being this big, right? So, this has expanded for sure with the internet, but in general, it still is the case that we often become involved with people who are near us, just for ease, right? So proximity effects are easy to see. Studies of students living in a community found that people who had doors facing the courtyard had 2 times as many friends as those whose doors faced outward. So we're also more likely to become friends with people who live nearby, right? So like some of my closest friendships in college were folks who were on my dorm halls my first year. And I still like connect with them when we are at reunions and such. Familiarity is another one. So the mere exposure effect basically says that like we have more positive feelings toward a person the more often we see them. So just like being around someone more often, you might feel better about them. And this is why sometimes like when you first meet a person, they're kind of like, I don't know about that person. But then they're a friend of a friend, so you hang out more, right? That suddenly you're like, this is one of my favorite people. The familiarity effect to be part of that. Mere exposure makes it more likely we will talk to them and ultimately establish some type of relationship with them. But if we initially really hate them, mere exposure is not going to help. Often we just hate them more over time. I'll give you all an example. So one of my closest friends in middle and high school, she was very dramatic. And the first time I met her, she said, I've decided to pursue my acting career, like literally with those motions. And I was like, oh God, I don't want to be around this person. And then our parents sort of figured out that we had a lot in common. They're like, well, check it out. And she ended up being, like I said, one of my best friends. So sometimes that exposure, hanging out with someone, getting to know them, getting past that facade, right? For her, it was all a facade, and she was a genuine and warm person underneath, can be really important. Physical attractiveness. This plays a key role in face-to-face romantic relationships, but interestingly also in friendships. Oftentimes we end up being friends with people who are similarly attractive as we are, if that makes sense. But results for here, it's kind of funny. So we can do like observational stuff, right? And then we can ask people. And what we find is that results are inconsistent between what people report about physical attractiveness and then what they actually do. They might be like, oh, no, someone's appearance doesn't matter to me at all. But then they're always choosing that attractive person. So that brings up the question, what actually makes someone attractive? So we know that something as simple as facial features can be really influential on how attractive someone is found. So for women, so what people find attractive in women tend to be like baby-faced features. So larger eyes, smaller nose, but then also those are combined with some mature features like prominent cheekbones. If you think about, if anyone in here knows a lot about like makeup tutorials, the whole like contour and highlight thing is emphasizing cheekbones, right? And for men, what people tend to find attractive in men is a strong jaw and a broad forehead. Now, in terms of physique, some of this goes back to our motivation chapter. We're talking about sort of what's realistic, what's not. Unfortunately, the physique that's found most attractive is often unreachable for people of any gender. But for women, we tend to find an hourglass figure, so smaller waist, bigger hips, bigger bust, more attractive. This says medium-sized breasts. I don't know how you measure that, but I guess just not too giant. And then for men, it's like this triangle, so broad shoulders and a smaller waist, a slim waist. Physical attractiveness is important to everybody. Anyone who says it's not, it is. Generally, studies find that it's more important to men than to women and in heterosexual relationships. That being said, again, everybody emphasizes it. And among newlyweds, men tend to emphasize their material resources to appeal to their spouse when they were dating, whereas women said, oh, I worked at enhancing my appearance. Now, the really interesting thing is these dynamics are changing, right? A lot of women are making as much, if not more, than men now. Women, I think it's over half the households in the US have women either as the sole breadwinner or a co-breadwinner. And some people are on board, right? And then some people can't handle this. Like I just read a story online where a woman was getting a promotion. She was going to be making 3 times what her fiance was. And he told her, you have to turn the job down because of it. And so she just broke up with him because she was like, absolutely not, right? But there are unfortunately still some folks who want to maintain these rigid roles. Now, what about attraction itself? So there's this idea I kind of just referenced when I was talking about friendship called the matching hypothesis. And this proposes that people of similar levels of physical attractiveness gravitate toward each other. So in your friendships, in your relationships, you're probably not consciously doing it, but we tend to gravitate towards people who are of similar levels of physical attractiveness to us. Now, that's one hypothesis. The other one is what's called the resource exchange. And this is an evolutionary-based theory. There's a whole branch of psychology called evolutionary psychology. Dr. Martorell teaches a whole course on it here in our department. And the idea here is that in heterosexual dating in particular, men trade occupational status for physical attractiveness in female. And so like the stereotype of this is the rich old man marrying a young, attractive woman. And David Buss, who's been writing about this since 1988, believes that mating patterns depend on what each gender, sex has to invest in terms of survival. So for men, we often hear this described as they want to mate widely. So reproductive opportunities are the most important, so they show more interest in sexual activity and physical attractiveness. For women, we say that they want to mate more wisely, choose a man with good genes who will support them, So parental investment theories state women choose mates who will supply the resources they need to support offspring for many years. Now, again, based on what I just talked about with that story of the woman online, right? This dynamic has certainly changed in the modern world, right? There are many women who are making as much or more than men, right? There's the whole like cougar stereotype, right? Like the older woman going after the young, attractive man, right? So there are definitely some holes here. I also had a professor in grad school who, when he talked about this theory, said like, if the guys like want to actually like be in a relationship, they kind of have to go along with what the woman wants, right? This obviously also is very heterosexual based, so it doesn't account for things like LGBTQ plus couples, single parents, things along those lines. All right, so now we're going to start talking about romantic love in a little more detail here. And we're going to get into Sternberg's triangular theory of love. So this theory says that all loving relationships are composed of some combination of these three components. So you have intimacy, passion, and commitment. Intimacy is warmth, closeness, sharing. It involves giving and receiving emotional supports, valuing the other person, and something as simple as sharing possessions. Passion is made up of intense feelings. They can be both positive and negative, including, but not limited to, sexual desire. So passion involves needs for nurturance, self-esteem, and for some people, control and dominance. And then commitment is the decision and intent to maintain a relationship in spite of the fact that we know difficulties and costs may arise. So commitment is, sometimes it's going to be tough, but we're going to stick it out. And commitment changes over the course of the relationship. So short term, you make the decision like, I want to date this person. And then long term, you do things to maintain that relationship, right? And these can be little things. So my husband and I have been together 20 years. We've been married 15. And like some of the ways that we best show love to each other is like, hey, you're looking a little run down. Why don't you go take a nap? I'll hang out with our kiddo, right? And like little things like that can be like really meaningful in a long-term relationship. Now, 7 types of relationships can result from the presence or the absence of the 3 of these. And the ultimate type of love, according to Sternberg, is consummate love, and when each of these 3 components is present. And we're going to go through and break down all these types of relationships. And as you can see, it's called the triangular theory because he literally put it onto a triangle. And so that intimacy, that liking, that is, if you only have intimacy, you don't have commitment, you don't have passion, this is someone you just kind of like, probably not going to be in any kind of long-term relationship with them other than maybe a friendship, right? If you only have commitment, you have no passion, no intimacy, you have an empty relationship, right? It's like, okay, we're in this together. There's no love, there's no support, right? If you only have passion, you have an infatuate relationship, sort of one of those hot and heavy, exciting, but then like probably not going to sustain. Sometimes if you have a passionate relationship, you don't even like the person, right? Now, if you have both passion and intimacy, then that's a romantic relationship. This is something where you have that exciting charge, you genuinely like the person, but you don't have that commitment. Maybe not yet, or maybe you never have it, right? Some people have open relationships and they're good with that. If you have the intimacy and commitment, this is companionate. So this, again, sometimes arranged marriages end up being this, right? You might not have passion, but you have a commitment and you really like each other. And then if you have passion and commitment, Sternberg called this fatuous. Basically, this could be like a long-term affair. This could be something where, again, it's like very sustaining, very fulfilling, maybe sexually, but then again, maybe you don't like the person, right? So that's not like a filled out relationship. And so again, consummate relationship is what Sternberg says we should all be going for, where you have all three. You have the intimacy, you actually like the person, right? You have the passion, and then you have the commitment. And so the idea is we should be aiming for that, but then sometimes these other types of relationships can work for people, depending on their stage of life, right? And as long as the two people in the relationship are both on the same page, it's less problematic, right? Than if someone thinks they're in a consummate relationship and someone else is like not there. Now, another thing that's been talked about related to romantic love is attachment. So if you've taken Psych 101, you've probably talked about infant attachment to their parents, right? Well, Hazen and Shraver have drawn a connection between attachment patterns early in life and then the quality of adult relationships, and particularly romantic love relationships. And so this will be often talked about as like adult attachment or romantic attachment. And so this diagram, and I'm going to read it because I know like it's teeny up there, but I'll read through it for y'all. This shows how your parents' caregiving style can feed into how you end up interacting with other people as an adult. So let's say your parents' caregiving style when you're growing up is warm and responsive. They were good at knowing when to be supportive and when to let you operate on your own. The relationship with your parents was comfortable, no major reservations or complaints. Then as an infant, you develop secure attachment. This is an infant caregiver bond in which the child welcomes contact with a close companion and uses that person as a secure base from which to explore the environment. So then when they grow up to be an adult, they'll have a secure adult attachment style. They'll find it relatively easy to get close to other people. They'll be confident and comfortable depending on them, and having them also depend on me. They don't worry about being abandoned or about someone getting too close. Now, let's say the parents' caregiving style was cold and rejecting. They were distant, not very responsive. The child wasn't their highest priority. The parents' concerns were often elsewhere. It's possible that maybe the parent just didn't even want kids. Those infants develop what we call avoidant attachment. This is an insecure bond with the caregiver. They have little separation protest. So like if the parent leaves, the kid's like, whatever. And the child will actually avoid or ignore the caregiver. So then they also develop an avoidant adult attachment style, where they're uncomfortable being close to others, find it difficult to trust other people, difficult to allow themselves to depend on other people. They get anxious when anyone gets too close. And then their partners will push for more intimacy and they're just not comfortable with that. Now, if the parent's caregiving style is ambivalent or inconsistent, they would be sometimes warm, sometimes not. Sometimes their agenda, like what the parent wants to do, got in the way of their receptiveness and responsiveness to the child's needs. They loved them, but they didn't always show it in the best way. Then that person might develop an anxious ambivalent attachment style as an infant. This is an insecure infant caregiver bond characterized by strong separation protest. So this is when the parent tries to leave, the kid like breaks down. And a tendency of the child to resist contact initiated by the caregiver, particularly after a separation. And that translates into being anxious ambivalent as an adult. They find that others are reluctant to get as close as they would like. So these might be clingy people, right? They worry their partner doesn't really love them or won't want to stay with them. They want to merge completely with another person, and this desire sometimes scares other people away, understandably, right? Like that might freak some people out. So as children, we develop these particular patterns, and these can carry over into our adulthood. About 55% of adults do have the secure attachment style. They trust others. They find it easy to get close to others. They have the longest lasting relationships. The avoidant adults are about 25%. And again, they're uncomfortable getting close to others. They have trust issues. They're the least likely to have good relationships. And then those anxious ambivalent adults, that's about 20%. They're obsessive and preoccupied with their relationships, have a fear of abandonment, and they're often jealous of any interaction their partner has with somebody else. And so as you can imagine, maybe the worst combo would be someone who's avoidant and someone who's anxious ambivalent, right? Because like one person's going to pursue, and the other person's going to run. Not going to be great. So Bartholomew and Horowitz developed a 4-category model of adult attachment styles that results from the interactions of 2 different factors. One is perceptions of your own self-worth. And those can be positive perceptions of your own self-worth or negative. And then the other is perceptions of others' trustworthiness and reliability. And again, are those positive or are those negative? So this is another idea based in the idea that we form attachments styles as kiddos, and then those affect us as adults. But this is a different constellation of these things. And this will be represented by this diagram. So you've got your image of self up on top and your image of others, and then whether those are positive or negative in each case. So if you are positive in how you think about other people, and you're positive in how you feel about yourself, then you're going to have what they call a secure attachment style. So you're comfortable with intimacy and autonomy, and again, pretty healthy. Then if you have a positive image of yourself, but a negative image of others, you don't trust other people, you're dismissing of intimacy, you can be counter dependent. This can be really harmful to your partner. If you have a negative view of yourself, poor self-esteem, but a positive view of others, you become preoccupied with that relationship. Sort of like those anxious, ambivalent folks we just talked about. If you have a negative view of yourself and a negative view of other people, then you're fearful. You're fearful of intimacy. You might be socially avoidant altogether. You might avoid any type of friendship. And so the primary difference between this model and what we just talked about is having 2 forms of avoidant attachment style. So you have the fearful avoidant, where you have negative self-views, but then you also have the dismissing avoidant, and those are those who have positive self-views. Now, which of these is better? Depends on who you ask in psychology. If this model is better than the 3 model we just looked at, who knows, right? But it is, I think, important to see that there's not like one set theory, and yet these have a lot of commonalities. So in conclusion, thinking about romantic love as attachment, securely attached individuals have healthier, more satisfying relationships. And people who have a secure attachment style are more likely to find securely attached partners. So people who are securely attached find each other, they establish a good relationship, and one can imagine they might then like pass that down to their children and parenting them in a way that creates a secure attachment. And so a really important part of this is that early bonding experiences produce relatively enduring relationship styles. Now, does this mean you're screwed if you have a bad, like, infant attachment style? No. This is why therapy is a thing, right? And you can work through these things and you can figure out ways to be in healthy relationships. But if you don't seek anything out, research does suggest, yeah, you might kind of just perpetuate this cycle. And these tendencies tend to be most noticeable under stress. So when there's a stressful situation, securely attached people give support, but they also seek out support for themselves, which is really healthy, right? It's healthy to get help for yourself. Avoidant attached people tend to withdraw and become angry when asked to give or receive support. And then anxious attached people become fearful and they'll often show hostility when they're stressed out. And although we know that, like, securely attached people tend to find other securely attached people, we don't have good data about, like, what happens to the other constellations of, like, when you have an anxious avoidant and an anxious ambivalent and a secure person, you know, like, in a relationship together. How would that work? Still doing the research on that one. So that is, like, very tiny overview of the romantic love literature. The next thing we're going to start talking about is the power of persuasion. And persuasion involves communication of arguments and information. And the big thing with persuasion is you're trying to change another person's beliefs or attitudes. So persuasion involves communication of arguments and information intended to change another person's attitudes. Now, attitudes are beliefs and feelings, and they can be about people, ideas, objects, kind of what have you, right? So attitudes are beliefs and feelings about people, ideas, and objects. And so there are different elements to the process of persuading someone. And you can see these used in advertising. You can see these used in political candidates as they try to make their points. You can see these used in people who are just trying to get you to, like, do something, right? And so the source is the person sending the message, right? Is this an individual? Is this a company? Is this a political candidate, right? All those things will make a difference. The receiver is the person to whom the message is sent. So source sending the message, receiver, person who receives it. Person to whom the message is sent. The message is the information that's transmitted by the source. So what do you want the receiver to know? And again, we're trying to persuade them, so believe. And then the channel is the medium through which the message is sent. Is this talking to someone directly? Is this a phone call? Is this a social media post? Is this an article? Is this a political ad? Is this an ad for a children's toy, right? How are you sending this message? And so this gives you all of those sort of ideas of how these things can vary and how persuasion can be more or less challenging depending on a number of factors. So the source factors, the person who is sending the message, their credibility, right? Do they seem like someone you should listen to, right? Do they have expertise? Do they have trustworthiness? Are they likable? We know that attractiveness goes into this. And similarity to you. How much can you relate to them? Message factors. Do you want to scare the person? If you don't do this, this is what could happen, right? Or do you want to appeal to their logic? Do you want to present only one side of the argument, or do you want to try to present both sides and then show how your side is better? And then repetition. The best example I've ever seen of the use of repetition was in like the late 90s, early 2000s. There was a product called Head On, and the ad was just literally head on, apply directly to the forehead, head on, apply directly to the forehead. It just kept repeating. And then the by what means. Again, these channel factors. Are you doing this in person? Is it on TV or now streaming? Is it on audio tape or on the radio? Are you doing it on social media or other avenues on the internet? And then to whom? The receiver factors are going to affect how receptive they are to all of these things, right? People's personalities, people's expectations, and pre-existing attitudes about the source, the message, the channel, right? When I was growing up, folks, my parents' age would be like, be careful who you talk to online, don't believe what you hear online, right? And now, unfortunately, like those are the people who fall for like Nigerian prince scams sometimes, right? Or Facebook scams. And so those pre-existing attitudes can change over time and also can make you more susceptible to some of these things. So persuasion is more effective when we look at source factors, when the source is credible and likable. So sources are deemed credible if they have expertise and they seem trustworthy. So this is why you'll see for like toothpaste products, you know, 1 out of 10, or not 1 out of 10, that would be pretty persuasive. 9 out of 10 dentists recommend Crest or whatever, right? There you're saying, oh, well, these people, they have expertise, they have a degree, they practice, they should know something, right? And then likability. Likability is increased when the source is attractive or if they're similar to the receiver. And so as much as I like to applaud the increasing diversity that we see in advertising now, I don't know that it's in the service of actually showing diverse people. The idea is, oh, well, if we show diverse people, then more people in the US, since we're more diverse as a country, are gonna feel like they can relate. This likability factor is why a lot of brands will use celebrities to advertise, right? We tend to like a lot of major celebrities. And so, ooh, if this celebrity is endorsing this product, maybe I should try it. Now, message factors, message are more effective when you use two-sided arguments. This might surprise you. You might think, oh, no, it's going to be more effective when you just present your own side. No, if you can present both sides and then like show how the other side is wrong, much more effective. People are like, oh, you thought this through. I see how you poked holes in this, right? Okay, I believe you. Emotional appeals are huge here, right? This is why politicians will have stories about people they've interacted with, tug at your heartstrings, right? Kamala Harris has been telling a story the past week or so during her interviews about she went down to the areas affected by Hurricane Helene. She met a family where one of their family members had been killed by a tree falling on their house and how much like that impacted her, right? And then other people can relate to that. And so the idea is you can shift people's attitudes by appealing to their emotions. And then they also try to create positive feelings in the receiver. If you buy our product, if you vote for this person, right? If you go along with whatever, you're going to feel great. This is going to be wonderful for you. You're a good person if you do this, right? And so that can really be important as well. And so these ideas about the power of persuasion is really go into advertising and consumer psychology. So consumer psychology is a branch of psychology that involves marketing products to people. Our knowledge of persuasion in psychology and these various factors is why people who are psychology majors in college are very appealing to Fortune 500 companies. I don't like to say we know how to manipulate people, but we kind of know how to manipulate people, right? If you're more comfortable with the word persuasion, we know how to persuade people, right? And that's a really effective skill for people in Fortune 500 companies. They also like that psych majors tend to be good at emotional intelligence, people, and they also tend to be good at communication, both through writing and oral presentations. And so we see various ways that you can advertise things to try to appeal to folks. So Apple through the years, this is a very old Apple ad, but they have kind of maintained this very simple, sleek advertising, right? Hey, this is the new tech, you want it because it's cool and because, you know, like there's a lot of status that comes with having it and whatnot. Right, and sometimes we will see use of race in various ways. I believe this top one was an ad for Sprite, and you had LeBron James playing various characters. So these are all LeBron, just in various makeup, right? We know that LeBron James is eminently likable, right? He's a good guy, he's an excellent basketball player. And so the idea is if we associate LeBron with something, more people will buy it, right? There are some racialized elements, and so are we appealing directly to the African-American community? Maybe, right? Here is an ad for a private school, a Montessori school. And here we have a white child and an Asian child, right? And so these people are very consciously saying, these are the parents who are going to put their kids in our school because they want their kids to advance, right? And maybe there's nothing wrong with that, but what if we put an African-American child in this ad, right? And said, hey, this is also open to it. Because in fact, Montessori schools are very diverse, which is wonderful. We also find different ways to appeal to people, right? Sometimes, again, it's really simple. Oh, are you locked out? Look, this dude, he seems pretty trustworthy. He'll come and open your door, right? Here's who you call. Gets it across pretty simple. And here we go. The 4 out of 5 dentist thing, right? Allstate, you're in good hands. We're gonna take care of you, right? And then off. I love this. It's like new design. Like it really matters what the outside of a bug spray looks like, right? But new design, get you excited. And then they'll keep you protected with repellency you can count on. They are protect your family as awareness of West Nile virus and other dangerous mosquito-borne illnesses grows, right? Using some of that fear tactic to be like, you need this or you could die, right? It's silly, it's goofy, but they've researched it and this is what appeals most to people and gets people to buy their products. Alrighty, we're gonna stop there for today. And we will carry on talking about social psych on Friday. Think about what day it was.